Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Given to temptation, pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. A couple of days ago, actor Henry Cavill posted a note on his social media, such as Instagram, stating that he would no longer be portraying Superman in DC Cinematic Universe films. Now, your Henry Cavill had a meeting with DC Studios heads James Gunn and Peter Safran, and sadly, after the end of this meeting, he was told that he would no longer be portraying Superman in DC Cinematic Universe films. Now, this was devastating news to many in fandom, especially many fans of the DC Cinematic Universe who wanted to see your Henry Cavill get another chance to play the Man of Steel. Now, many believe that he is the perfect actor to portray Superman, and many were very hopeful after seeing him make a cameo at the end of Black Adam, where we thought it was going to lead into him playing Superman in the new DC universe, which was helmed by your James Gunn and Peter Safran. And this was a real slap in the face to many of those fans, because we thought that the DC Cinematic Universe was finally going to make a step in the right direction, because many comic fans thought that Black Adam was a major step in the right direction, because that film was very true to the source material of Black Adam's story and really captured the spirit of many mid-2000s Justice Society of America comics, and we thought that we'd finally get to see a Superman movie that is similar in style, would capture the spirit of the 1978 Superman, the movie, which starred the late Christopher Reeve. And that's the thing that stings many comic fans out here, is the fact that we won't get to see Henry Cavill get a chance to portray a hopeful and optimistic Superman like the late Christopher Reeve played, or us getting a chance to see a Superman that is similar to one like the late Christopher Reeve, someone who brought hope and optimism to people. Now, this news is devastating to most comic fans, and this devastation is further compounded and making many comic fans really frustrated with your DC Comics and DC Cinematic Universe, because in addition to this news, we also heard that your Amber Heard is coming back to the Aquaman sequel, and we're also hearing that DC is doing everything it can to go out here and try to salvage The Flash, a movie that starred Ezra Miller, a person who was a clear problem to the production and the overall optics at DC Comics. Now, this news of your Amber Heard, a woman who was just found liable as related to just abusing her ex-husband, Johnny Depp, and your Ezra Miller, a person who was known for being problematic off-set. This is not good news for many comic fans, sci-fi fans, or fantasy fans, and it's not good news for your DC studios, because it doesn't really show that they are focused on trying to rebuild the image of DC Studios after the dysfunctional state of the Snyderverse. Now, the Snyderverse had suffered a lot of tarnish to their image by producing mediocre films and having inconsistency as related to hits, because outside of Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Shazam, the entire DC Extended Universe has been just a complete mess. And this whole announcement that your Henry Cavill won't be returning as Superman, and your Warner Brothers is going back out here and with DC Studios to bring back dysfunctional people like Amber Heard and Ezra Miller, really does not give people any sort of confidence for future films, nor does it go out here and build any sort of momentum as related to building up people's anticipation for future films. Because the cameo by Henry Cavill, this was something that brought a lot of hope back to a lot of DC fans as related to DC films, and that hope was completely dashed by your James Gunn and Peter Safran, who basically wound up losing all of the goodwill of many of the fans of the DC cinematic universe that he was trying to build. And basically, many of those fans have just lost all of their hope as related to wanting to anticipate seeing these films, because when we start to see dysfunctional people like Amber Heard and your Ezra Miller being pushed and their projects being pushed, that optically looks very bad for your DC studios, and it crushes much of the momentum that those films would have had, and future films would have had they continued to build on the momentum of Black Adam. Now, as I see it, your DC Studios is making the mistake that I see many alcoholics and drug addicts do. What they do is go out here and make it look like they want to get their stuff together, and then as you're rooting for them and supporting them and helping them try to get their stuff together, what they do is get back on the wagon, start drinking the sauce, and then going back to their dysfunctional behavior. And that's where the whole relationship between DC Studios and comic fans just is just miserable, because it looks like to me that your James Gunn and Peter Safran want to continue with the same codependent relationship DC Studios and Warner Brothers have been trying to foster with comic fans since 2011, when your Dan Didio and Warner Brothers executives went out here and tried to shoehorn the New 52 into the marketplace and tried to force their New 52 designs down people's throats. And since then, the DC brand has become one brand that has been dysfunctional, and as it's been pushing dysfunction as the norm for business, people have been alienated from the DC brand, and they've been so alienated from the DC brand that the brand has basically lost lots of value over the last couple of decades, because DC continues to try to ram dysfunction down people's throats and arrogantly believing that people need DC superheroes. No, people don't need DC superheroes, because people have, even though they have disposable income, they can go spend their money on different characters where they don't have to deal with a dysfunctional relationship that is trying to be established by the owner of those intellectual properties. Because what your DC Studios is trying to do is trying to force customers to accept their dysfunctional versions of these characters and accept the dysfunctional behavior of the actors portraying them. And the only thing you can do in this kind of situation is the same thing I did back in 2011, and that is start to cut ties with your DC the same way I cut ties with DC Comics, because if a producer wants to go out here and promote dysfunction and wants to try to get me into a dysfunctional relationship because they think I need their characters and I need to see stories with their characters, that's when comic fans need to show them that they're dead wrong. And the way you deal with a DC Comics, which is I call dysfunctional comics, and their DC dysfunctional comics cinematic universe, is to keep your money in your pocket as related to any future DC cinematic universe movies, because if they can't get their shit together, then I don't need to deal with them, because like that alcoholic or like that drug addict, the only thing you can do at this point is to walk away from these individuals, because they don't want to change. They want to just go out here and find enablers who will just go along with them and keep them going on in their dysfunction. And that's a toxic relationship that will drive you down. And that's not a relationship I want to be a part of, because as a kid who grew up in 1989 with Batman, I know what an interdependent relationship between a comic fan and a studio is. And in an interdependent relationship between a comic fan and a studio, the studio goes out here and produces the best superhero movie it can make, and the fans go out here and they become enthusiastic about it to the point where they're anticipating seeing that film, because they're looking forward to seeing something of quality because the studio wants to put its best foot forward. No, what I'm seeing with James Gunn and Peter Safran, sadly, is showing me through their actions they want to continue going on with the same dysfunction that went on with Zack Snyder's DC Cinematic Universe. And this is where your David Zaslav really needs to step in if he really cares about your Warner Bros. Discovery surviving at this point, because this is where you just have alienated a major customer base by saying, oh, we've got new management. We want to go out here with a new direction for Superman. No, you cannot go out here and jerk people around by showing us a Black Adam movie where we're seeing Superman and getting our hopes up and then dashing those hopes, because, again, that is another middle finger thrown up at DC fans who have suffered, as I've seen it, ever since 2002 when Dan Didio was hired, and continue to suffer as we've seen our favorite characters mutilated and killed in DC Comics over the last the last decade and a half, and we've seen many of our favorite characters put into a dark, dreary new DC universe that is so dysfunctional and jumbled in the comics that it's borderline unreadable at this point. And now we're getting a DC cinematic universe, which we thought we were going to get our hopes up and thought we were going to be on a road to a good direction, and having all those hopes dashed. And at this point, there comes a point where you just have to just walk away from someone because they're so dysfunctional that that there's nothing that they want to do to change. And I've been at that point with DC Comics, and I'm urging more people to walk away at this point, because like that alcoholic, like that drug addict, DC doesn't want to change. No, what they want to do is attach an emotional hose to its customers, and as they attach the emotional hose to their customers, they want to jerk those customers around, creating lots of drama. And life is too short to be caught up in the drama of a multi-billion-dollar corporation that can't get its shit together. Because if a company can't get its crap together as related to its products, then it shows me that the people there really don't care about the customer, and it's time for the customer to sever ties with that company and let that company go out here and crash and burn, similar to what many customers are doing with Disney at this point. And both of these companies, again, they take their customers for granted. They think we're going to sit through their dysfunction. They think we're going to sit through their drama. We think we're going to sit through their nonsense. But people need to start showing that their dollars have value, and more importantly, their time has value. Because if a company values your time, they're not going to do things like jerk you around in a disrespectful way, the way we were jerked around in October with Black Adam. You sat there and made us believe that Henry Cavill had a chance at coming back as Superman. And furthermore, you disrespected Henry Cavill because Henry Cavill went out here and he walked away from a very lucrative role as The Witcher, and he put off other projects thinking that he was going to be able to go out here and reprise this role as Superman. And what was done to Henry Cavill was extremely egregious in the professional setting, because what you did was mislead this man, cost him a gig, and that, again, is just disrespectful, because all you had to do was come out in October and say, Henry Cavill isn't going to be Superman. That's all you needed to say, put the period at the end of things, but now you jerk people around and further aggravate them. And as I see it, this is the type of disrespect and contempt shown to DC Comics fans that make it where people don't want to be DC Comics fans or fans of the DC Cinematic Universe. So all that goodwill that was built up with Black Adam has been tossed away, and all of that momentum that could have built a DC Cinematic Universe and rebooted it is all tossed away, and now we're back on the road to dysfunction. And if DC wants to, and Warner Brothers wants to continue on that road to dysfunction, then as I see it, most comic fans, if they have any sort of backbone or stones, they would stand up and say, okay, enough is enough. You don't want to get your shit together, and since you don't want to get your shit together, then it's time for me to put a period at the end of things and walk away from you and let you fall. That's what healthy people do when they're dealing with a dysfunctional person who is beyond help, refuses to get help. I mean, whenever you have a family member who is addicted to drugs, or a friend who's addicted to drugs or alcohol, and you've done everything to help them, and they still are still on the bottle or still taking the dope, the only thing you can do is walk away from that person. And it's a painful thing to do, to let that person fall, and it hurts to do it, but it's something that has to be done, because if you don't do it, these people will drag you down with their toxicity. And the whole thing is, the irony is that your help only just enables their dysfunction, and the only way to deal with their dysfunction is to cut them off for good. This is something that is, again, very painful to do, because it hurts you that you can't help this person. But the irony is, the only way you can help that person is to go out here and walk away from them, because unless they see that they need to get their stuff together, they're not going to get their stuff together. And this is something I saw when I was reading the Iron Man storyline, where Tony Stark was an alcoholic and he was homeless and in the streets. Steve Rogers, after saving your Tony Stark, talks to him about his own father's alcoholism and says that I can't help you unless you want to help yourself. And this is the same thing that I see with your DC studios. I can't help you unless you want to help yourself. I can't help you go out here and be a blockbuster brand unless you want to make a blockbuster brand. And the only way you can go out here and make a blockbuster brand is if you get your head out of your ass and go out here and realize that you're fucking up your own business. And that's the same thing that many people tell an alcoholic. And again, it's painful for them to hear, but the only person who can save your DC studios at this point is DC Studios. And if they don't want to help themselves at this point, the only thing you can do is walk away from DC Studios, because walking away is the only way we can get many of these movie studios to get themselves together, because either they're going to just keep creating box office bombs, pandering to an audience that doesn't exist, or they're just going to go out of business. And either way, that nothing is lost, because the whole thing is, if a person doesn't want to get themselves together, then competition will come in and replace them. And sometimes people have to see competition coming in to replace them, to terrify them to wake up. And again, this is what happens when you get a whole bunch of people who've become comfortable and complacent. It's because we had a telecommunications bill of 1996 go out here and eliminate competition. And ever since the telecommunications bill of 1996 eliminated competition, we've gotten a lot of movie studios become comfortable. We've got a lot of movie studios becoming lazy, a lot of movie studios getting sloppy and making bad decisions because they take the audience for granted. And it's just time for people to walk away from your DC studios and many of these other companies like Disney, because the only thing that is going to help these studios is people walking away and letting them hit rock bottom. That's the only way you can deal with an industry that doesn't want to get it together, is you've got to let that industry fall to the point where it hits rock bottom, because only at rock bottom is the place where an addict realizes that their life is a complete mess, and either they'll pick themselves up out of the gutter like Tony Stark did in the Iron Man comics, or they will just fall into a grave and wind up dead forever. And again, it would be sad to see the brands of your Warner Brothers and DC studios go out of business like that, but that's just par for the course, because there were companies that thought they were going to go on forever that are no longer with us like now, like Gimbals, Woolworth, Payless Shoe Source, and many other companies that thought they would be here forever, but because they took their customers for granted, they took their people for granted, they took life for granted, they are no longer here with us. And sadly, this is where the final fate that I see happening to your Warner Brothers Discovery and Disney. They may not be around for the mid part of the 21st century, because there are people there who just, again, abuse the audience, take people for granted, and jerk people around thinking that people just have to have their products. No, I don't have to have to go watch a Superman movie. If you don't want to go out here and show me the customer respect, then I can show that I'll put my money in my wallet, or I'll spend it on something else that is much better from one of these independent producers. Because as I see it, life is too short to sit there and let a company disrespect you. Because what your James Gunn and Peter Safran did here by jerking the audience around, that is extremely unethical, extremely disrespectful. And the only way you deal with this kind of disrespect is not to talk about fire James Gunn on Twitter. No, you get him fired by going out here and keeping your money in your pocket. And once you keep your money in your pocket and let a lot of these movies go out here and bomb at the box office, then you won't have to talk about fire James Gunn on Twitter. The Warner Brothers Discovery's board will do the job for us. Now, if you want to pick up some of my action-packed fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, and other novels I've done like Eternal Night, The Thetas, and A Recipe for Success. You can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books at other online booksellers like Barnes & Noble, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Smashwords. And if you want to see me make more comic-related videos and be able to buy more independent comics from independent crowdfunding projects, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Pick up your copy of John Haynes at Death's Door at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere.